There is no perfect time to make a move. But there are clear signals in the data that tell you whether your window is open, narrowing, or closed. Today, we build the tool to read those signals. For your specific situation, your income, your city, your life. Not a generic checklist, not a blog post with 5 cities and 2 sentences each. A system you can run on your actual numbers and get an actual answer. Most people who should seriously consider leaving their city never do. Not because the math doesn't work, it usually does. Not because they lack the money, the opportunity, or even the desire. They stay because they're making an enormous life decision using the same tools they use to pick a restaurant. Gut feeling, incomplete information, and a quiet hope that the decision will somehow make itself. It doesn't, and every year they wait. The gap between what they could have and what they actually have grows wider and quieter and harder to close. Here's what the data tells us about this pattern. Roughly 43% of remote-capable workers in high-cost metros have seriously considered relocating in the last 3 years. Of those, fewer than 12% actually made the move. The gap between considering it and doing it isn't explained by logistics. People figure out logistics when they're motivated enough. It's explained by decision architecture, or more precisely, the complete absence of one. The people stuck in that gap aren't waiting for the right moment. They're waiting for a framework that never shows up. That framework is what we're building today. It's called the NextCity Decision Score, and it's built on 6 variables. Each one measures a different dimension of your current situation: financial, professional, and personal. Some are pure math, others are qualitative, but we'll convert them to numbers too, because saying you have strong ties to your city is a real variable. It just needs to be calibrated, not ignored. When you've calculated all 6, you'll have a score between 6 and 30, and that score tells you whether the conversation about moving deserves to happen now, or whether you've got 2 to 3 years before urgency becomes real. The 6 variables are housing cost ratio, homeownership timeline, remote work compatibility score, tax environment penalty, career location dependency, and life anchor strength. Each one gets a score from 1 to 5. The benchmarks are specific. A housing cost ratio above 35% of your take-home pay is a warning signal. A homeownership timeline longer than 8 years in your current market is a clear case. A remote compatibility score above 60% in your sector means geography is already optional for you, whether you've acted on that reality or not. These aren't arbitrary thresholds. They're derived from the patterns of people who have already made this decision, successfully and unsuccessfully across dozens of markets. Before we get into the variables, there's one thing worth naming. The reason most smart people stay paralyzed on this decision isn't laziness and it isn't fear of change. It's that they're trying to make a permanent decision with temporary information. They look at their rent, they look at a few Zillow listings in a cheaper city, and they try to build a verdict out of 2 data points. That's not analysis. That's anxiety dressed up as research. The NextCity Decision Score doesn't give you certainty because nothing does. What it gives you is a structured way to weigh the right variables in the right order, so that by the end, you're not guessing, you're deciding. There's a difference, and by the time we've worked through all 6 variables, you'll feel exactly what that difference is. Let's start with the variable that is quietly draining more wealth from high earners in expensive cities than any other single factor: housing cost ratio. It sounds like an accounting term, and in a way it is, but what it actually measures is something far more human: the percentage of your monthly take-home pay that goes directly toward keeping a roof over your head before you've bought a single thing, saved a single dollar, or invested a single cent. When that number climbs above 35%, the data is consistent and unambiguous. You are not building wealth. You are maintaining your current position at an accelerating cost. Here is how you calculate yours. Take your total monthly housing cost, rent or mortgage, not utilities, not renter's insurance, just the core payment, and divide it by your monthly take-home pay after taxes. Multiply by 100 and you have your ratio. If you earn $145,000 a year in San Francisco, Your monthly take-home after California state taxes and federal withholding is roughly $8,200. If you're paying $3,800 in rent, your housing cost ratio is 46%. That is not a tight budget. That is a structural problem. 46 cents of every dollar you bring home is gone before you make a single decision about your financial life. The benchmark we use in the NextCity Decision Score is 35% as the threshold between manageable and problematic. Below 30%, housing is not your primary constraint. Look at the other variables before drawing conclusions. Between 30 and 35%, you're in the yellow zone, not an emergency, but worth the math. Above 35%, you score a 4 on this variable. Above 45%, which describes a significant portion of renters in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, you score a 5. That's the maximum signal on this variable, and it means the housing math in your current city is working against you every single month, compounding quietly into years of foregone wealth. Now for the second variable, homeownership timeline. This one measures something the housing cost ratio can't capture on its own, not where you are right now, but how far the finish line actually is. To calculate it, take the median home price in your current city, subtract your current liquid savings, and divide the remainder by what you're realistically able to save per year, given your current expenses. The result is the number of years before you can make a down payment at today's prices, assuming prices hold flat, which in most expensive metros they will not. If that number is above 8 years, you score a 4. If it's above 12 years, you score a 5. Take Stephanie in Los Angeles. She earns $118,000 a year, pays $4,400 a month in rent, and has been unable to save more than $8,000 annually after expenses. The median home price in her neighborhood is $920,000. A 20% down payment is $184,000. At her current savings rate, that's 23 years away. And that's before prices move another dollar higher. Her homeownership timeline score is a 5, the maximum. That number alone should stop her in her tracks. It's not pessimism, it's arithmetic. And arithmetic, unlike anxiety, gives you something to act on. Together, her housing cost ratio and her homeownership timeline tell a very specific story. The city is not just expensive today. It is closing the door on the future she is trying to build. Keep that in mind as we move to the next two variables, because one of them is about to change the entire calculation for a large portion of people watching this. Here is where the framework gets interesting. The first two variables told you how much your city is costing you right now and how far homeownership actually is. But those two numbers only matter in full context. And the context that changes everything for a growing portion of high earners is this: whether your income is geographically portable. Variable 3, the Remote Work Compatibility Score, answers that question with a number instead of a shrug. And for a lot of people watching this, that number is already above the threshold that makes geography optional. To calculate your Remote Work Compatibility Score, you need to look at your specific role and your specific sector, not what your company currently allows, but what the market structurally supports. Start with your job category. According to labor market data from the last 3 years, roles in software engineering, data, digital marketing, financial analysis, content strategy, UX design, and most professional services functions are remote compatible at rates between 65 and 85% of total positions posted nationally. If you work in one of those categories, your baseline is already above 60%. Then apply a personal multiplier. If your current employer is fully remote, add 10 points. If you're hybrid with 2 or fewer required in-office days, add 5. If your role involves no client-facing work that requires physical presence, add another 5. When your total compatibility score clears 60%, you score a 4 on this variable. Above 75%, it's a 5. Below 60, score a 2. Geography still matters for your income, and that changes the calculus significantly. Daniel in San Francisco scores a 5 here without hesitation. He's a senior software engineer, fully remote since 2021, at a company with no plans to reverse that policy. His income is completely untethered from the zip code where he sleeps. That means every dollar he saves by moving to a lower-cost city is a dollar his San Francisco salary generates in a market where that salary goes dramatically further. The remote compatibility score doesn't just modify the housing variables, it multiplies them. A 46% housing cost ratio in San Francisco, paired with a remote compatibility score above 75%, is not a dilemma. It's a decision that's already been made by the data. The only thing left is the permission to act on it. Variable 4 is the one most people forget to calculate until tax season, and by then they've already signed another lease. The tax environment penalty measures the real annual cost of living in a high-tax state compared to your most realistic destination alternatives. This is not just about state income tax, though that alone is significant. California's top marginal rate is 13.3%, and Illinois sits at 4.95% flat. It also includes local income taxes, which New York City layers on top of state rates, and the property tax implications if you're planning to buy. To calculate your personal tax environment penalty, take your gross income and apply the effective combined tax rate for your current state and city. Then do the same for your 2 or 3 target destinations. The difference in annual dollars is your penalty, the amount your current geography is extracting from you purely through its tax structure, with no corresponding benefit to your personal wealth. For Kevin in Chicago earning $92,000 a year, the math is concrete and uncomfortable. His combined Illinois and Chicago City tax burden runs to approximately $14,000 annually. If he relocated to Tennessee or Florida, both zero-income tax states, that number drops to roughly $6,000 in federal-only obligations, with state liability at zero. The gap is $8,000 a year, every year, simply from geography. That is not a rounding error. That is a car payment, an investment account contribution, a meaningful acceleration of his homeownership timeline in a market where prices are already within reach. When you combine a high remote compatibility score with a substantial tax environment penalty, the framework starts producing scores that are hard to argue with, and we still have 2 variables left. The first 4 variables in the NextCity Decision Score are largely mathematical. You plug in numbers, apply the benchmarks, and the scores come back clean and unambiguous. The last 2 are different. They deal with the parts of your life that don't live in a spreadsheet: your career trajectory, your relationships, your sense of identity and belonging. Some people dismiss these variables as too soft to quantify. That is a mistake. Soft does not mean unmeasurable, and unmeasurable does not mean unimportant. What it means is that you need a structured scale instead of a gut reaction. And that is exactly what we give you. Variable 5 is career location dependency, and it asks one specific question: how much does staying in your current city protect or accelerate your professional trajectory? This is not the same question as whether your job is remote compatible. We already measured that. This is about the ecosystem around your career. If you work in venture capital in San Francisco, your physical proximity to the investor network is a real professional asset, even if your laptop technically works anywhere. If you are a physician climbing toward department head at a specific hospital system, your location is your career. If you are a mid-level marketing director whose entire client base is digital and whose industry conferences happen twice a year in rotating cities, your location contributes almost nothing to your upward trajectory. The honest answer to this question is rarely all or nothing. It lives somewhere on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 means your city is irreplaceable to your career, and 5 means your career would not notice the difference. To score yourself, consider 3 dimensions simultaneously. First, how much of your professional network is physically concentrated in your current city versus distributed nationally or globally. Second, how many of the best opportunities in your field in the next 5 years will require or strongly prefer physical presence in your current market? Third, if you relocated to your most realistic target city, how long would it realistically take to rebuild the professional relationships and visibility you currently have? If the honest answer to all 3 questions points toward low dependency, score a 4 or 5. If even one of them reveals a genuine professional cost to leaving, calibrate accordingly and score a 2 or 3. The goal is not to rationalize staying or going. It is to put a real number on a variable that too many people either overweight out of fear or dismiss out of wishful thinking. Variable 6 is life anchor strength, and this is where the framework requires you to be honest in a way that most relocation calculators completely ignore. Life anchors are the non-financial, non-professional ties that create real friction against a move. Aging parents within driving distance, a partner whose career is location-dependent, children in schools they love, a community built over a decade that would take years to replicate, or a deep personal identity tied to the cultural fabric of a specific city. These are not obstacles to dismiss. They are legitimate variables in a serious decision. The scoring here runs from 1, meaning your anchors are strong and deeply rooted, to 5, meaning your anchors are minimal or highly portable. A single person in their late 20s with parents in good health in another state, and a social circle of colleagues who are also considering leaving scores a 4 or 5. A parent of 2 school-age children whose own parents live 20 minutes away and whose partner has a career that requires physical presence in the current city scores a 1 or 2. Here is what these 2 variables do within the framework, and this is the part most people miss. They do not override the financial variables. A life anchor score of 1 does not cancel out a housing cost ratio of 46% and a homeownership timeline of 23 years. What the qualitative variables do is set the bar for how convincingly the financial case needs to make its argument. A high life anchor score means the financial data needs to be overwhelming before the conversation becomes urgent. A low life anchor score means even a moderate financial signal is enough to justify a serious, immediate evaluation. The variables work as a system, and in the next chapter, we run that system on 3 real cases to show you exactly what the output looks like. The framework only earns its credibility when it runs on real situations and produces results that are specific enough to be useful. So let's do exactly that. 3 people, 3 cities, 3 very different combinations of variables, and 3 verdicts that look nothing alike. This is the part where the NextCity Decision Score stops being a concept and starts being a tool you can hold in your hands and use on your own numbers tonight. Daniel is 34, a senior software engineer in San Francisco, fully remote, earning $145,000 a year. His housing cost ratio is 46%, score of 5. His home ownership timeline, given San Francisco median prices and his current savings rate, is over 15 years, score of 5. His remote work compatibility sits above 80%, score of 5. His tax environment penalty, comparing California's effective rate to a zero-income tax state, runs to roughly $12,000 a year, score of 4. His career location dependency is genuinely low. His network is distributed, his company is remote first, and his industry hires nationally, score of 4. His life anchor strength is moderate. He has a long-term partner who is also remote, close friends in the city, but no children, no local family obligations, and a social circle that is itself fractured and partially dispersed, score of 3. Daniel's total NextCity Decision Score is 26 out of 30. That is not a borderline case. That is the data telling you the window is wide open and the cost of waiting is measurable and compounding. Stephanie is 41, a marketing director in Los Angeles earning $118,000 a year, hybrid 3 days in office. Her housing cost ratio is 45% on a $4,400 monthly rental, score of 5. Her homeownership timeline is 23 years at her current savings rate against LA median prices, score of 5. Her remote compatibility score is around 55%, factoring in the required in-office days and her client-facing responsibilities, score of 2. Her tax environment penalty is real but moderate compared to California's highest earners, score of 3. Her career location dependency is genuine. Her industry network is concentrated in LA, and her role requires physical presence at least part of the week, score of 2. Her life anchor strength is high, 2 school-age children, no desire to disrupt their education mid-cycle, a sister and elderly mother in the San Fernando Valley, score of 1. Stephanie's total NextCity Decision Score is 18 out of 30. That lands her in the middle band. The situation is financially serious, but the qualitative variables create real friction that the data has to respect. The verdict for Stephanie is not move now. It is build a 2-year plan that aligns a school transition, a negotiation for increased remote flexibility, and a target market analysis so that when the window opens fully, you're ready to move through it immediately. Kevin is 29, a financial analyst in Chicago earning $92,000 a year, single, no children. His housing cost ratio is 31%, score of 2, just inside the yellow zone. His homeownership timeline in Chicago is 12 years given local prices, and his savings rate, score of 4. His remote compatibility is approximately 62%, sitting just above the threshold, score of 4. His tax environment penalty between Illinois, Chicago city tax, and a zero-tax destination is $8,000 annually, score of 3. His career location dependency is low to moderate. Financial analysis roles are increasingly distributed, though some firms still weight physical presence in major financial hubs, score of 3. His life anchor strength is minimal. He's been in Chicago only 3 years, his family is in another state, and his social ties are still forming, score of 4. Kevin's total NextCity Decision Score is 20 out of 30. His housing cost ratio alone might suggest patience, but the convergence of a 12-year homeownership timeline, a portable income, a meaningful tax penalty, and nearly 0 life anchors makes a strong cumulative case. The verdict for Kevin is not emergency, but it is genuine. A targeted 12-month evaluation of 2 or 3 specific markets where he can live well, save aggressively, and purchase his first investment property simultaneously is not optional planning. It is the highest leverage financial move available to him right now, and the score says so clearly. You have 6 variables. You have a score. Now let's talk about what people do wrong at exactly this moment, because the framework only protects you if you use it correctly. And there are 3 specific errors that derail otherwise smart people right at the finish line of this decision. They are not exotic mistakes. They are the predictable ones, the ones that have kept high earners in expensive cities for years longer than the data ever justified. Naming them is the last thing the framework needs to do before it hands the decision back to you. The first mistake is waiting for certainty. It sounds like patience, but it functions like paralysis. The person making this mistake says, "I'll run the numbers again next year when I have more savings, when the market settles, when my situation becomes clearer." What they are actually doing is raising the bar for action to a height that real life never reaches. Certainty is not a feature of any major life decision, not the decision to get married, not the decision to change careers, and not the decision to move. The NextCity Decision Score does not promise certainty. It promises clarity. And clarity is what allows you to move with confidence rather than wait with anxiety. A score above 22 does not mean you must move. It means the conversation is overdue, and the cost of continuing to delay is now measurable in real dollars every single month. The second mistake is optimizing for the wrong variable. This is the person who reads the framework, sees that their life anchor score is a 1, and concludes that the whole analysis is a dead end. Or the person who sees a housing cost ratio of 32%, technically below the alarm threshold, and decides the rest of the variables don't need to be run. The score is a system, not a menu. You do not get to select the variables that confirm the conclusion you already want. A single low-scoring variable does not invalidate a high total score, and a single high-scoring variable does not manufacture urgency where the full picture doesn't support it. Every variable earns its place in the total because every dimension of your situation contributes to the real answer. Not the comfortable one, not the frightening one, the actual one. The third mistake is treating the decision as permanent. This is perhaps the most insidious of the 3, because it makes the stakes feel existential when they are not. The person who believes that moving means leaving forever will always find a reason to stay, because a permanent, irreversible decision deserves infinite deliberation. But moving is not permanent. Cities are not prisons, and zip codes are not identities. The people who make this move successfully, the Daniels and the Kevins, and eventually the Stephanies, do not think of it as a final answer. They think of it as a recalibration, a repositioning, a decision that can be revisited in 3 years with better data, more savings, and a clearer picture of what the next chapter requires. So here is the verdict, structured cleanly for the 3 bands the score produces. If your total NextCity Decision Score is between 22 and 30, the data has already made the decision. You are simply waiting for permission that no one is going to give you except yourself. Start the target market analysis now, not next quarter. If your score falls between 15 and 21, the case is building but not yet overwhelming. The right move is a structured 12 to 24-month plan that addresses the variables holding your score down, with a hard review date on the calendar. If your score is below 15, the framework is telling you that your current situation has more going for it than your anxiety is admitting, and that a move made today would be driven by emotion rather than evidence. Come back in 18 months and run the numbers again. The score will tell you when things have changed. That is what a real tool does. It does not tell you what you want to. Here, it tells you what the data actually says. And now, for the first time, you have a way to listen to it.